In this episode, we focus on a classification skill that seems simple at first, but becomes extremely useful the moment you have to explain your control set to different stakeholders. Identifying control types. Control types are a way of describing what kind of safeguard a control is, how it functions, and who typically owns it. The types in our title are management, technical, common, and operational controls, and learning to separate them clearly helps you avoid confusion, double counting, and gaps. When a beginner hears a control name like access review or audit logging, it is easy to picture it as one thing, but in practice, controls often combine people, process, and technology in a way that requires careful allocation and evidence. By classifying controls thoughtfully, you can communicate more clearly, plan implementation more realistically, and design continued compliance activities that actually match how the control works. The goal here is to help you recognize each control type in plain language, understand why each type exists, and understand how the types fit together in a mature compliance program. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at CGRC.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Start with management controls because they are often misunderstood as paperwork and therefore undervalued. Management controls are controls that set direction and governance, such as policies, standards, risk management processes, roles and responsibilities, and oversight activities. They are about decisions, expectations, and accountability rather than about technology settings. A management control might define how access is approved, how risk is accepted, how changes are authorized, or how incidents are escalated. It matters because without governance, technical controls can be inconsistent and operational controls can become improvisation. Management controls create repeatable behavior across teams, which is essential for compliance because compliance depends on showing that the organization's security posture is stable and intentional. A beginner misunderstanding is that management controls are optional or secondary, but in many frameworks, management controls are the backbone that makes other controls meaningful. If you cannot show clear policies and oversight, assessors often question whether technical controls will remain effective over time. Technical controls are the controls most people think of first when they hear cybersecurity, because these are implemented by systems and technology. Technical controls include mechanisms like authentication enforcement, access restrictions, encryption, system hardening, network segmentation, and automated logging. They operate through technical means rather than through human judgment at the moment of enforcement, which is why they are powerful for consistency. A technical control can prevent unauthorized access even when a user makes a mistake, and it can record events reliably even when no one is paying attention. However, technical controls are not self-managing, which is where beginners can fall into a trap. A technical control still needs configuration, maintenance, updates, and monitoring, and it still needs governance to ensure it is used appropriately. Technical controls also produce evidence, but evidence is only useful if it is reviewed and acted on, which often requires operational and management controls. The best way to think of technical controls is that they are the machinery of protection, but machinery still needs operators and rules. Operational controls sit in the middle because they are carried out by people following procedures as part of normal operations. Operational controls include activities like access reviews, log reviews, incident response, backup testing, vulnerability triage, training delivery, and configuration change processes. They are not purely management because they are not just policy decisions, and they are not purely technical because they require humans to execute and interpret. Operational controls are often the controls that determine whether an organization stays compliant over time, because they are the repeated behaviors that maintain controls and generate trustworthy evidence. A beginner misunderstanding is thinking operational controls are weak because humans are involved, but operational controls can be very strong when procedures are clear, responsibilities are assigned, and evidence is recorded consistently. Operational controls are also where many failures occur when teams are understaffed or processes are unclear. So identifying operational controls is crucial for implementation strategy because they require time, training, and coordination, not just technology. Common controls are sometimes the most confusing type because they are not defined by what the control does, but by where and how it is implemented for reuse. A common control is a control that is implemented once and then used by multiple systems, typically provided by a shared service or enterprise capability. For example, a centralized identity service may provide authentication controls for many systems, and a centralized logging platform may provide log storage and integrity protection for many systems. Physical security of a data center can be a common control for all systems hosted there. The key idea is that the control is common because it is shared, not because it is a particular kind of safeguard. A common control can be technical, operational, or management in nature, but it is delivered as a shared capability across multiple systems. This is why common controls are so important to document clearly, because if you assume a common control exists without proving your system is in scope, you create compliance risk. Common controls are also the source of many efficiency gains, because they prevent every system team from reinventing the same safeguards. Now, one subtle point that helps you avoid confusion is that these types are not all on the same axis. Management, technical, and operational describe the nature of the control and how it functions. Common describes the delivery model, meaning how the control is shared. That means a single control can be both common and technical, like centralized authentication enforcement, or common and operational, like a centralized security operations team reviewing logs and responding to alerts from multiple systems. A control can be common and management-oriented, like an enterprise-wide policy and risk governance function. Understanding this prevents you from forcing each control into exactly one bucket and then getting stuck when it does not fit. Instead, you can classify by nature and then also identify whether the control is common, system-specific, or partially shared. This layered classification is more realistic and helps with allocation and evidence planning. It also explains why inherited controls and common controls are related ideas but not identical, because a system inherits a common control when that common control covers the system. When you identify control types, you also gain a powerful way to explain why different controls require different evidence. Management controls often require evidence like approved policies, risk decisions, role assignments, and oversight records. Technical controls often require evidence like configuration states, enforcement outcomes, and system-generated logs that show the mechanism is active. Operational controls often require evidence like review records, incident tickets, training completion records, and documented procedures showing the activity occurs on schedule. Common controls often require evidence that the shared service is assessed or documented as providing the control and that your system is included in its scope. If you do not distinguish types, you might look for the wrong evidence, like expecting a policy document to prove a technical enforcement or expecting a system setting to prove a human review occurred. Control type classification helps you match evidence to control nature, which makes your documentation more testable and your assessment smoother. It also helps you identify where evidence responsibility lives, because common controls often require shared evidence sources. This classification also helps you allocate ownership more intelligently, because different control types tend to live with different stakeholders. Management controls often sit with governance, risk, compliance, and leadership functions because they involve policy and decision authority. Technical controls often sit with system engineering, platform teams, and security engineering because they involve configuration and technical enforcement. Operational controls often sit with operations teams, security operations, and system owners because they involve recurring tasks and response. Common controls often sit with enterprise service owners, such as identity teams, network teams, and platform security teams. When you can state the control type, you can also state why a particular owner makes sense. This prevents the mistake of assigning operational reviews to a team that has no time to perform them or assigning management oversight to an engineering team that lacks the authority to approve risk. Allocation becomes less arbitrary when control type is clear. Another beginner misunderstanding is thinking technical controls are always stronger than management or operational controls, but strength depends on whether the control addresses the relevant risk and whether it is maintained. A strong policy and oversight model can prevent risky behavior across many systems, which is a powerful risk reducer. A disciplined operational process can detect issues early and keep systems stable, which may matter more than a fancy technical feature that no one monitors. Technical controls provide consistency, but they can be misconfigured, disabled, or bypassed if governance and operations are weak. The best compliance programs use all three functional types and use common controls where possible to scale. The point of identifying control types is not to rank them, but to understand their role and their maintenance needs. When you understand that, you can design a control set that is balanced and sustainable rather than lopsided. By the end of this lesson, the main outcome is that you can look at any control and describe what type it is in terms of how it functions and whether it is delivered as a common control across systems. Management controls set governance, expectations, and accountability, creating the structure that keeps the program consistent and defensible. Technical controls enforce rules through technology, providing repeatable protection and generating system-based evidence. Operational controls are the recurring human activities that keep controls functioning, respond to events, and produce proof of ongoing compliance. Common controls are shared implementations that multiple systems inherit, making compliance scalable when documented correctly. When you can identify these types clearly, you communicate better, allocate responsibilities with fewer gaps, select the right evidence, and build a continued compliance strategy that matches reality instead of fighting it.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.